Right, hey guys, how we doing? So Annie News has gone and done his part 2 on how strong is Shalltear Bloodfallen. So, what are we going to do? We're going to check it out, yo. Do it.
Last episode, we talked about all the abilities that came from Shalltear's vampiric side, including her original berserker-like form.
Which is weird.
But this time, we're going to talk about her remaining classes, and every single one of her known spells, skills, and abilities.
Cool.
As much as I'd love to talk about her divine equipment too, there's simply too much info on that to fit into this video. So, let's take a look at what else went into Shalltear's build to classify her as one of the strongest 1v1 fighters in Nazareth.
Cool.
But first,
Succubay t-shirts.
You can get your Pleiades, Succubay, or Nabe merch from the links in the description.
They look really good.
Now, let's begin.
Alright.
If you look closely at Shalltear's classes, there isn't really a consistent theme going on. They just seem to be a random assortment that was picked out for their powerful and useful abilities,
They random.
as well as synergistic aspects with her overall build.
Probably.
As you may recall, only 20 levels were dedicated to the heteromorphic specific racial classes, those being her vampire levels. The other 80 were devoted to her job classes, and though most of them are unknown, we do know a few thanks to her stat card. Specifically, she has 10 levels in Cleric, 5 in Cursed Knight, 5 in Valkyrie, then an unknown amount in one called Blood Drinker, leaving approximately 60 levels unaccounted for.
Ooh, that's a lot of levels.
These few, though, it's clear she's got a mixed blend of both warrior and caster classes, which would normally result in a mediocre build since spreading herself too thin across too many roles typically isn't very ideal. But it would seem that Perroncino found a way to get the best of both worlds, and we'll look into that real soon. We've already discussed a lot about clerics. They worship a deity, and in turn, that deity powers their magic.
Yeah.
For Shalltear,
In exchange for, like,
that she
prayers and
worships
stuff.
the Supreme Ones as her god, since, well, they created her. Like, she might pray to Ainz or Perroncino. But that's actually not the case. It's not like the guild members wrote in each of the NPCs' bios that they must be revered as gods. No, as a matter of fact, Perroncino picked a random vampire-esque raid boss named Cannibal as the deity for Shalltear to worship. Which she wasn't too impressed by, considering it was a monster that was slain by the Supreme Ones.
Alright.
In any case, that being her designated deity means she's likely an evil-type cleric, one that channels negative energy, meaning that all her negative energy spells would not only be effective at damaging living opponents, but also healing herself and any other undead in the area.
So,
but before we get into what exactly those spells are, it's best that you first understand the two main types into which they're categorized.
It's like using white magic, dark magic
Depending on the nature of a spell, it can be either arcane or divine. Though it's not like there was a distinct line between the two.
sound like I'm talking about
Many spells are available to both arcane and divine spellcasters. Reason being that the main difference between these two categories are the root of where the power came from. Arcane spells are typically acquired through study and involve using mana to shift the fabric of reality. Their potential effects are practically unlimited and usually quite flashy. They include shooting fireballs, creating illusions, animating golems, and everything else in between. Divine spells, on the other hand, are normally acquired through communion with a higher power, aka a deity. Which, as you now know in Overlord, even if that deity doesn't exist, merely having faith in something higher up is sufficient to give the ability to cast divine spells. These tend to be more subtle and include things like buffs, healing, and utility, or holy, dark, and fire spells, thus giving undead clerics a significant advantage when fighting against other undead creatures. We see many of these aspects reflected in Shalltear's spell selection, which is quite immense and will certainly stem from other spellcasting classes that weren't identified
Jesus
earlier.
Christ, what a list.
And since Overlord's tier magic system pretty much directly parallels the magic in Dungeons & Dragons, we can confidently describe and rank each of her spells, as they're essentially carbon copies of each other. The only thing that Overlord does differently is the addition of that 10th and super tier. You know, just to add that extra OP factor.
Just some more OP
relating
stuff.
It to Dungeons & Dragons, it will also help us associate a potential class to each of the spells, giving us a much better idea on what other classes Shalltear's build might entail. So, let's go through each of them one by one. Brilliant Radiance. Approximately 8th tier. You know the spell Smite in League of Legends? Yeah, it's pretty much that. A spell that calls down a holy power from the heavens to smite the enemy, dealing significant damage to most undead and targets that are weak to holy, but also does no damage to targets that are aligned with good, and only half to those that are neutral. In Shalltear's case, she tends to use this as one of her main damage spells, alongside the 9th tier Vermilion Nova spell. This being a targetable spell that hits the enemy with a very large pillar of flame, most likely as a higher tiered version of your typical Flame Strike spell. Force Explosion. Ranking approximately at the 7th tier, It
Just a
creates
little bit
shockwave of
over
force in a specific
Megumin's
direction.
attack.
Think of a force push from Star Wars.
Yeah,
It can push enemies or objects away,
Mm-hmm.
and even block projectiles or certain spells if timed correctly.
that's cool.
We see Shalltear use it to break Ainz's Wall of Skeleton. In a similar strain of spells, there's the 7th tier Force Sanctuary, a defensive one that creates a circular barrier of pure force around the caster that's manifested as a white light and blocks all attacks,
Cool.
both physical and magical. It essentially made the caster immune to most forms of magic, as the barrier was invulnerable while active. But at the same time, you're unable to attack while within.
Right.
Of course, as it is with any barrier, sure it can block any attack, but
But
after
you can't
taking so much damage, it will disappear.
Break. Yeah.
Gate, a high-ranking utility spell that creates a large portal linking one destination to another, allowing for the instant transportation of any number of
Like using
people
my Titan
so
in
long
Destiny.
as the portal remains open. In order for teleportation spells like this to work, the caster must have a very good idea of the destination in mind, either having been there personally or using another means to visualize
be able to see it,
such
right.
as scouting through
Makes
magic
sense.
or looking at a detailed image. Similarly, the 7th tier spell, Greater Teleportation, can teleport
It's slightly
either
better
the
than
caster
teleportation.
or a single target they're in contact with over an infinite distance with zero chance of failure,
Right.
meaning 100% teleportation accuracy.
Cool.
You see, regular teleportation had a chance of misfire,
So it'd be
and
slightly
sticking
off.
the caster in a completely different destination.
So it is
than
better
intended.
than normal
And
teleportation.
such risks increased when the caster
I was
was
trying to be
less
sarcastic.
familiar with the destination, because, once again, the caster needed to be able to properly envision the destination in their mind before teleporting. Greater Lethal, a very high-ranking spell
little bit
that
better than
deals a significant
normal
amount of
lethal.
negative energy to a single target, meaning
10th
it can
tier.
act as a powerful healing spell for undead or a damage spell against living creatures.
Cool.
It seems to function identically to the divine spell from Dungeons & Dragons known as Inflict Wounds. This came in 5
Well, that kind of
variants
stuff where it's like if you use it on one
increased
thing, it has a totally
Inflict
opposite
light,
effect on another.
moderate, serious, and critical wounds, then a final variant simply called Harm. If we
Harm.
had to guess, Greater Lethal would be an upgraded version of Harm, and Harm basically dealt a significant flat set of damage that scaled with the level of the caster.
Right.
So it's likely that Greater Lethal acted this way as well. Implosion. One of my personal favorites. Have you ever wondered what would happen if you spawned a black hole inside of someone?
Whoa.
No? Just me? Oh, okay. Well, Implosion is pretty much that. A 10th
Yeah.
tier spell that causes the bodies of
Within
multiple
themselves.
creatures to collapse in on themselves.
Cool.
As much as you'd think
Go
that
down.
this would one-shot just about anything, those with enough physical resistances can fend off this attack.
Right.
So it's more useful as a tool to mass annihilate weak enemies. We actually see Shalltear use it back in Season 1 when she's fighting some of the bandits. Switching back to some more utility now, we have Invisibility, a low-level spell that does as the name states.
Mhm.
It makes a target or yourself invisible for a specific period of time,
That's cool.
or after performing an action
God,
that
she has a
will
lot of
notify
abilities,
someone
doesn't
else
she?
of your
Jesus
presence.
Christ.
There are various counters to this, such as rogue or rangers who can spot signs of invisible creatures without using magic, as well as the fact that it only blocks out vision and not sound. There are stronger variants, though, such as complete invisibility and perfect unknowing.
Right, okay.
which
I
both
love how they just
eliminate
add
all
like a
traces
word
of
in front of
threat.
it just to
Of
make
course,
it.
she can also combine invisibility with
There's
silence
invisibility,
to
and then
increase
there's
her stealth
complete
without using a
invisibility.
high-tier spell. Silence is only at the 2nd level, and it completely eliminates sound over a defined area. Not only is it useful for sneaking around, but if you increase the target area to encompass your current
Silence.
battlefield, you could
Greater
prevent
silence.
casters from successfully using spells that require speech to be activated. Though that technique is only effective in the New World, since Yggdrasil didn't make it necessary to shout the name of your spell when casting it.
Right. You
Another
can just use
low-level
it.
utility spell is Life Essence, which allows the
13.
caster to inspect an ally or enemy target's HP.
Hmm.
Though it can easily be countered with the spell False Data Life. This
Of course
makes
it can.
the Life Essence rating inaccurate by displaying a fake HP value instead of their actual health. Shalltear also has Mana Essence, which pretty much does the same thing except for mana
Don't know why I find them
instead
so
of
funny.
HP. And once again, it can be countered with False Data Mana.
Of course it can.
Now, as far as utility goes, those last few aren't very powerful, but what is the spell known as Destroy Magic. In D&D, there
Yeah.
are magic negating spells known as Dispel Magic and Greater Dispel Magic.
Of course, there's a greater one.
Destroy Magic is an even more powerful version of those, placing it around the 9th tier. And what it does is basically cancels out any ongoing effects of other magic. It could be an animated golem,
Right.
a summon, a force field, pretty much
I recognise
anything
that golem
that's
from
active
Fate
because of
Apocrypha.
magic can
I've
be
been watching
negated
it.
by this spell. Though the probability
finished it,
that
actually. It's
Destroy
good.
Magic is successful is dependent on both the caster's level and the level of the spell that they're trying to destroy. As you'd expect, the stronger you are as a caster, the more likely it is for Destroy Magic to be successful. Then there's her summoning spells.
Oof.
We've already discussed her summon household ability,
Mm-hmm.
but she also has the Raise Kin skill and the 10th tier summon monster spell.
Cool.
Summon monster is the highest level of summoning magic, and is capable of creating the strongest creatures. You can expect their levels to be around 70 to 85.
Damn.
And presumably, the caster can choose from a wide selection of creatures to summon.
That they've got,
though
yeah.
certain spellcasters can specialize in specific types of creatures. So, we've been through damage spells, healing spells, a whole bunch of utility.
She's got so
and now
much
summons.
stuff going on.
How about we mix in some of her time magic now?
Ooh!
Time Accelerator. This speeds up time relative to your opponent,
Right.
which in turn lets you move at unnatural speeds, while everything around you slows to a crawl.
That's cool.
Of course, it has been mentioned that certain magic abilities and items can render one immune to the relativity effects of time magic. In such cases, these individuals aren't slowed down or stopped, and can continue to move at the same speeds as the caster.
But everything else around them
Overall,
still slow.
Time Accelerator seems to be a slightly weaker version of the 10th tier arcane spell Time Stomp. This one's slowing your opponent down by such a significant amount that they appear practically immobile.
Yeah, they're not moving,
It
right.
still allows for limited movement, but much, much less than what
Like,
Time Accelerator
nearly
does.
stopped then.
Now, you'd think that spells such as these have some strange
nearly
effects
stopped.
on the functionality of the world itself. And you'd be right. You see, time manipulation actually prevents cause and effect from functioning properly during its duration. Spells and attacks that occur during a time stop don't affect enemies at all.
Oh.
Instead, if they were to affect a target, the caster would have to time the casting of their spells so that their effects are synchronized to take place the instant the time spell ends.
Wow.
So it's
Whoa.
not like time manipulation
Oh.
was some extremely OP uncounterable move. It likely
Damn.
required a high level of skill, in-game experience, and knowledge to successfully pull off a combo that made the most of these spells. Finally, Shalltear has Wall of Stone. It's literally a barrier made of stone.
Is it
and
really?
mostly used to protect against physical attacks. While we know that
And then she
Shalltear
could use
uses
the
it to
Greater Wall
encircle
of
herself
Stone.
in a protected barrier, Yggdrasil was said to have a complicated system allowing spellcasters
Which can be
to
seen
specify
from
properties
space.
such as distance and area of effect
random joke
for
in my head
spells
there.
like these, giving the user a lot of flexibility with regards to their spell usage. But yeah, that's every spell Shalltear is known or suspected
Christ,
to have,
it's a lot.
either because she's casted it before or claimed to know it. It's unclear which comes from which class, but it's likely that a lot stem from her unknown spellcasting classes, most notably the ones that don't involve teleportation, time manipulation, mind control, and force magic. As for the classes that we do know, well, let's take a closer look at each, starting with Blood Drinker. Though we
Cool.
don't know how many levels she has in it, we do know its primary ability is Blood Pool. As Shalltear kills her targets, she can collect their blood in an orb that would hover by her side. This blood can then be used for many things, most notable of which was a source of mana to cast spells with, which would definitely be an essential tool to spellcasters.
That's such a cool picture.
Though I suspect not every spellcaster had access to it. Perhaps only races that fed upon their opponents or drank their blood had access to this Blood Drinker class.
Makes sense.
Then she has her 5 levels in
Why else
Cursed
would anyone
Knight,
else need it?
which may sound similar to something like a Black Knight or an Evil Paladin, but Cursed refers to something much more significant. After all, supernatural afflictions like lycanthropy and vampirism are frequently referred to as curses, so perhaps a Cursed Knight is only available to warrior classes like those. Regardless, we see the effects of this curse during the hideout raid, as one of the bandits tries to impale her with a broadsword. Shalltear plucks it out and
Don't go.
rips it,
Don't
as
go
if
there,
about to
Wood.
swing it.
Gotta run.
Instead, it rusts away almost instantly.
Which is cool.
That's not to say that she can't use all weapons, because she does have her Spewit Lance,
Mm-hmm.
so maybe it's just low-level and non-magical ones that she can't use. Anyway, a potential class ability that stems from this one is her Impure Shockwave Shield.
Cool.
This creating an expanding barrier that pushes away enemies and attacks from all directions, acting as both an offensive and defensive
That's
ability,
really handy.
though it can only be used
Damn.
3 times per day. It falls in line
Can't
with the
attack
high
me and it's gonna
survivability
push you
and
away.
defensive capabilities of similarly styled Paladin and Black Knight class abilities. But it's the word impure that suggests its power is derived from something dark and sinister.
So it'd be
like
more
curse.
effective against, like,
One thing
good
to keep in
guys.
mind, though, is that Cursed Knight sounds much more like a warrior than a caster. So it's possible this specific ability stemmed from a similar class known as Cursed Caster, which is actually one that she's known to possess in the web novels. Another
okay.
useful aspect that is potentially from these cursed classes could be the ability to inflict a cursed wound. You see, the wearer of the world item that mind-controlled Shalltear, Lady Care, had grown extremely sick after the battle. She became a victim of the mysterious curse that the slain theocracy didn't recognize and couldn't heal with ordinary magic.
Oh, okay.
This ultimately led to her death a few months later. Given what had happened during the battle, it's not unlikely that Lady Care became a victim of a debilitating magic disease from Shalltear's attack. After effects such as these could likely only be removed from someone with around the same power as Shalltear, which basically meant that Lady Care was screwed no matter what. So it's
She ain't
definitely
got
a
no
potent
chains.
tool to have in Shalltear's arsenal, especially when facing off against lesser beings, which is pretty much all the time. To close things off, we have Shalltear's final known class called Valkyrie Lance. In Norse mythology, a Valkyrie was a spirit and servant of the god Odin.
Oh, okay.
Their name means chooser of the slain, and their job was to prepare for Odin an army of valiant dead warriors for the day of Ragnarok,
Wow,
which,
cool.
if you didn't already know, referred to the end of the world.
Mm-hmm.
They were present at every battle, picking out the best of the slain warriors to gain entry into Valhalla and become what's known as Inherjar. Depending on where you look,
We're learning-
they could be portrayed
we're
as
learning
noble
stuff here, guys.
maidens or bloodthirsty executioners, with entertainment media tending to stick to the latter. I'm sure you're familiar with the idea of these armored female warriors gloriously riding their horses into battle with spear in hand.
Well, yeah,
So,
they do it in
that regard,
Thor Ragnarok, don't
they're
they?
typically warrior spirits with some magical powers that can
Don't they?
influence the dead.
Yeah.
But when talking about Yggdrasil, a Valkyrie Lance is just a specialized variant of the base Valkyrie class, with different specializations existing for different weapon types. That's not to say that specializations are limited to physical weapons only. There could be a whole Valkyrie class tree dedicated to both spell type and weapon specializations. But for Shalltear's specific type of Valkyrie Lance, it's possible the requirements were for the user to be female and have some levels in a divine spellcaster class like Cleric, and then another few in a warrior-related class. Aside from having proficiency with the lance, the most important ability that comes from this class is Inherjar. Usable
Inherjar.
only once a day, it summons an identical clone of Shalltear with the exact same stats, essentially turning
Damn.
any 1v1 into a 2-on-1.
Obviously, you could only
The
use
clone
that once a day
gains
kind of thing.
buffs
Can you
and
imagine
immunities
just
that's
spamming that?
received from currently worn gear, but it cannot use any spells or special abilities. Its form is a construct, a catch-all race for creatures whose bodies are animated by magic or technology, sort of similar to that of the Golem Gargantua or the robotic automata Shizu Delta. At its core, it's a very simple ability, but it could very well be her strongest. Think about it. It's a spell that not only adds an additional piece to the battlefield, but doubles the amount of damage that you do.
Yeah.
In a 1v1 scenario, this would be absolutely devastating to the opponent. They now have to split their attention between two targets,
yeah.
deal with taking more damage, and figure out a way to defeat two identically
Gotta
statted
be in
enemies.
both.
So, I'm sure you see now why Peroncino added the Valkyrie class to Shalltear's
That's
build.
pretty damn cool.
Not much else is known about the Valkyrie's capabilities, but Shalltear does have a few other abilities that I've yet to speak on. First is spell resistance, a pretty standard property that boosts defenses against spells. The likelihood of you nullifying the enemy's attacks was dependent either on the caster's level or the level of the spell being casted. In Shalltear's case, her resistance worked better against weaker casters. Then there's her time reversal ability. This can
Which
be
is
only
pretty
used
cool.
3 times a day.
Right,
but
again,
it's
'cause it's so
extremely
goddamn
useful
OP.
against high-powered enemies. It allows her to negate the damage of a single recent attack by literally rewinding the time around her body to reverse the effects.
How do you
making it
focus on
seem
that
as
though
it
if you've
never
just been
happened.
like sliced?
It's not limited to damage either. You could reverse
I mean, I'm not
time
gonna go
to also
into
get
like
rid
the
of
whole
debuffs and
the.
negative status effects. And finally, she has
You know what I mean?
what's
If I had
called
that and I've been
Purifying
cutting
Charm.
off, I would
Another
be able to
tree
focus
used
on
with a limited ability
rewinding that. I'd be like,
fires a
oh
beam of
shit,
light
I'm
and
hurt.
deals certain damage. This was the spell that she used to strike down Lady
But I'm not a
Care.
big vampiric
Unlike other holy
beast, am I?
attacks, its potency wasn't dependent on the user's karma. I mean, if it did, Shalltear's negative 450 karma
Jesus.
would result in the attack being only useful as a flashlight. More importantly, though, she can spend a small amount of MP to make the attack have perfect accuracy and tracking ability. Yeah, Shalltear has aimbot, but it's
Cool.
not to say the ability can't be blocked.
Headshot,
It just
headshot.
won't miss. A magical force field or dodge skill like Mist Form can easily counter this ability, and it's not like the attack was particularly damaging either. It was more useful at long range to disrupt spellcasters that are in the distance. And that's every spell and ability that Jinfor and I can come up with. As you now know,
The girl's
she has
powerful.
just about every ability under the sun. Maybe even the sun itself with Vermilion Nova. But it's after knowing all of this that you can really appreciate the fight between Ainz and Shalltear.
Yeah.
Because it's not like she didn't use her kit to its fullest extent. She played that fight very well, but just lacked a bit of knowledge and cash-shop items to prepare for it. In that regard, Ainz had the advantage. Anyway, that's everything that I've got for today. Part 3 will cover her equipment.
Oh, cool, we got a part 3, cool.
She's considered to be the most powerful floor guardian. But before I go, don't forget you can get the Pleiades, Succubae, and Nabe merch from the links in the description.
There's a part
now,
3.
As always, thank you so much for watching, and if you enjoyed this type of anime content, then you already know what to do. So, until next time, ciao.
Ciao. Boss. Powerful. That's the word. I apologise for being sarcastic at parts throughout the video. I'm just in a funny mood. Like, it's just the naming of things. You've got this, and then you've got greater this, which is better than. It's like, of course it's better than, because it's called greater something or other version of. It's like, and I get that he's explaining it, so it's fine. I'm not taking the mick out of any use for that at all. It's just the initial naming of stuff is funny to me. So cool, we're going to part 3, which will talk about the equipment and stuff. That'll be awesome, we shall cover that. I've still got part 2 of Shalltear Cut content to react to, and then I'm still carrying on with the Fate lore stuff, and I've finished Apocrypha, so once I've finished the Fate's Day Night lore videos, I'll probably do the Apocrypha ones, because, yeah, I thought Apocrypha was weird. It was okay, it just wasn't as epic as Zero or Unlimited Blade Works, I thought, but it was still good, it was cool. But anyway, thank you guys very much for watching. What do you guys think of that? What do you guys think of this? Click like, subscribe if you haven't already. Leave comments down below, let me know what you should watch in future videos, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye. My god, that's the fastest outro I think I've ever done. Oh, these energy drinks.